Hi everyone, my name is Daniela and today I'll be presenting on using a media strategy to change the current narratives that the media portrays on incarcerated individuals and their path for offender rehabilitation. So the purpose of the presentation is to remove the negative stigma of individuals reintegrating back to society through the tenets of public criminology. The issue at hand is that the public receives their knowledge about the correctional system through non-mediated sources of knowledge, and Strett explains that essentially the lack of access that the media has to the correctional system makes it so that the media paints it in a negative light, and it allows the media to skew a lot of what actually takes place within correctional institutions, and it allows additionally for the media to dramatize events that take place there. And since many actual occurrences of what goes on in the correctional system isn't covered by the media, only dramatized events are, often about maybe someone breaking free from the system or maybe an offender reintegrating back to society that has been stigmatized. So this lack of access to information about the correctional system allows for the public to rely on these inaccurate sources of knowledge, and these sources of knowledge also often perpetuate the fear of crime in addition to the fear of individuals reintegrating back to society through alarmist headlines and dramatized languaging. To address this issue, I want to create a media initiative to bring awareness about correctional interventions and programming, and to use it as a means of educating the public about the correctional system against these anti-reintegration sentiments, which should be diminished. So looking at the media and public perceptions of the correctional system, Rosenberg and colleagues found that the more television participants watched, the genre was not relevant for the study, increased the support for deterrence and punishment, while rehabilitation supports decreased. Rosenberg further explained that the role of the public has been referred to as a potential cause for mass incarceration in the United States of America, when if you think of both of these points, it does make sense that with the more television people are watching, the more they're supporting hard-on crime, essentially narratives, which would mean that the public is looking for potentially politicians that have the same tough-on-crime mindset. Roberts and Hugh then found that despite people claiming that they support rehabilitation, there's still a lot of skepticism on if convicted people can change when they reintegrate back to society. And I think this is because there's often a disconnect between public perspectives on punishment and rehabilitation, and I think that additionally the public often can support rehabilitation, but there is the not in my backyard NIMBYism mindset of oftentimes in which people support something, but when it comes to, rehabilitated people coming back into the community, they do not support it in their community due to stigmas that are often entrenched for offenders. And this makes you, or at least me, think about how there's a disconnect within if we are incarcerating people to deter them from committing crimes and to rehabilitate. Why society is stigmatizing individuals that have served a sentence and been active within correctional programming? Why are they stigmatized when they are free, when they have served their time? I think that's a large disconnect, and it could be related to the media. Meanwhile, I also wanted to actually state what the correctional system in Canada aims to accomplish, and the goal is public safety, which they achieve through supervision and programming to foster rehabilitation. So for when the individual gets out of the facility, in hopes that they will have been rehabilitated and will not recidivate. And there are programs for reintegrating and preparing people into returning to the community, which means that, and I bolded it just to make it very clear, the goal for corrections is not mass incarceration, it's rehabilitation. So I wanted to look off how the media perpetuates these negative societal beliefs about the reintegration of incarcerated peoples. I insert a photo here of a character from Orange is the New Black, which I actually found pretty well-rounded in her story at the very end of the series, in which she has a very difficult time reintegrating back to society because all of the hardships that are placed upon her, like for finding employment and housing. So she ends up recidivating just to go back to the institution where she knows she's comfortable, she has friends, and she's not stigmatized at the same level, which she really truly was when she returned back into society. And I think that's really telling of institutionalization, as well as how society treats individuals that were incarcerated and have reintegrated back into society. And depending on the media consumed, it may influence how these people support detention over rehabilitation, as we saw some people are more supportive on hard-on crime approaches, even if these have been proven to not actually help recidivism in any way. It may actually increase it instead of going the other way. In addition, hard-on crime approaches are extremely expensive and have been seen as not nearly as effective as some other restorative justice options. But since the media does not actually capture life accurately within the institution or within corrections, it's really difficult to see how correctional programming actually works to aid people within the facility, as well as it makes it difficult to understand why we even need correctional programming. And another issue that exists is that Canada does not disseminate recidivism data, which allows sometimes the media to speculate, and it makes for people to worry about if the correctional system and the criminal justice system as a whole is actually succeeding in decreasing recidivism rates and even just crime rates in general, because they're not openly accessible to the public. So I created this infographic to give a visual guide for understanding the realities of recidivism. I find often that reading data off like a peer-reviewed research article, I can't conceptualize it the same as if I'm viewing it on some sort of visual medium, like this infographic, for example. So the recidivism in Ontario for this research was explained as returning to provincial correctional supervision on a new conviction within 2 years of completing either a provincial jail sentence of more than 6 months or probation, parole, or some sort of conditional sentence. So in the infographic, it shows a decrease in recidivism in comparison to previous years. Unfortunately, I didn't have the data from previous years, so I wasn't able to make a side-by-side comparison from these previous years, but that's what the Ontario government stated. And then they also explained that there's been a decrease of recidivism from high-level offenders in comparison to the past years, which in my opinion is very interesting because despite the recidivism rates decreasing within the media, and I think even within political narratives and campaigning, there is an explanation that crime is an all-time high and that we should be, as a community and society, very aware and almost scared of the influx of crime. But the reality is, at least in Ontario, that recidivism rates are dropping, and that as a whole, people are reoffending less. So it makes you really wonder about the sensationalist language that is used within our society about crime. So I wanted to do a slide about how correctional officers view rehabilitation, just because the media often depicts correctional officers as being evil or taking advantage of inmates, but overall, how they view rehabilitation as anything probably differs between individuals. But during training, correctional officers are obviously taught about rehabilitation, and I'm sure that it is something that they have to continually keep learning about throughout their careers. And when officers, at least in Canada, are employed by the correctional service, they have to sign on to uphold the mandate, which was looked at, I think, 2 slides ago, where I was talking about public safety through deterrence, but as well as rehabilitation. So throughout their career, they have to aid individuals in their rehabilitative efforts in order to strive for what the mandates of their job states. And Lambert found with their colleagues that prior judgments that were perpetuated from the media needed to be challenged when entering this field, which totally makes sense. I think this can go for a lot of different criminal justice jobs, in which if people come with, different narratives, they need to be challenged so that everyone in the community or institution are treated the same and equally, and thereby removing any other maybe negative stereotypes that they have, just so that everyone can be treated with equality and respect. I think that is extremely important for working in any field. And on the other half of my slide, I wanted to look at if having negative or skeptic views on rehabilitation, does this impact rehabilitation from a correctional officer's point of view? So yes, I think in anything in life, if you don't believe in something, I think it'll impact the outcome. And this is what was seen from a study that Lambert did with colleagues. So views on rehabilitation impacts how the staff actually treats the incarcerated individuals. And they found that having supportive attitudes for offender rehabilitation not only benefits the individuals within the institution, like the offenders, it also benefits the officer, because it increases job satisfaction not only within themselves but with their colleagues and others around them. And Lambert found that in Canada, correctional officers have as a whole reported to be supportive of rehabilitative programming, which is great news. So for this next slide, I wanted to look at correctional interventions. And correctional interventions are meant to target individual risk factors, which look at offenders' histories that may be used to predict future recidivism. But they also look at dynamic factors, which are potentially factors that individuals are able to change and be even made aware of through correctional programming. So for risk factors, like I said, sometimes they're not specifically related to crime, but they may impact reasons for criminal behavior, while dynamic factors would include targeting substance dependencies, teaching pro-social attitudes, include educational and vocational training, because to reintegrate back to society, there are needs to change these dynamic factors. And within many institutions, there's amazing educational and vocational training that can be offered to individuals, so that when they leave an institution, they may have like a ticket to do some sort of trade work, or they may have completed a diploma, or even at times some sort of degree while they're in the institution that will truly help them when they leave the institution. And correctional interventions also need to make sure that they prepare individuals for reintegrating back to society. This is extremely important because, as I mentioned a few slides ago, institutionalization can be a truly very difficult thing that individuals have to go through. So the better prepared the correctional interventions aids them to be, the better it will be when they reintegrate back into society. And I also wanted to touch on how important it is for interventions to be culturally relevant. So for Indigenous peoples and for African Caribbean Canadians, which are both two groups that are overrepresented within our correctional system, there needs to be programming that specifically adheres to them. So for Indigenous peoples, there's healing paths that have often pathway initiatives with elders, which is extremely important. Not only that they exist, but there has been issues in the past for accessibility, which is extremely important that individuals have accessible and hopefully frequent access to elders so that they can be provided with culturally relevant programming, therapy, healing lodges, and the medicine wheel. I actually included a picture of a healing lodge in Saskatchewan, and I also included the importance of culturally relevant interventions for African Caribbean Canadians because within our justice system, they are largely overrepresented, and even in more recent, I'd say in the last 5 years, there's been a lot more acknowledgement from the justice system as a whole about the overrepresentation of African Caribbean Canadians, and in recent sentencing decisions where an impact of race and cultural assessment, IRCA, has been done. Sometimes judges at the end of their sentencing decision will explain that within the individual's time within a correctional facility that there needs to be culturally relevant programming. So this programming can target dynamic factors like the racism they haven't endured, marginalization, potentially intergenerational incarceration, factors that hopefully can be targeted within their time within a correctional institution. So, following the tenets of public criminology, I wanted to disseminate the findings I found from reviewing the literature to the public. So, the plan for my media strategy is to use Instagram as a vessel to provide the public with criminological findings, specifically surrounding corrections and recidivism. Doing this in turn will hopefully remove the harmful stereotypes that incarcerated individuals endure. And I wanted to choose Instagram because it is used and accessed by the public, making it, in my opinion, a great vessel for disseminating knowledge. And hopefully through using this platform that individuals will become more aware about corrections and the correctional system. So moving on to the next slide, I wanted to convey my media strategy and the idea that I had conceptualized. So I made 6 sample Instagram posts to show the content that I would post. The information within these posts are all either from peer-reviewed research or from the Correctional Service of Canada or from the SRET textbook. I wanted for the content to look aesthetically pleasing. I thought I may have a higher chance of people reposting it to their feeds or stories if it in general was nice to look at. So for the first post, I was looking at explaining to the public, well, why does recidivism occur? Just for them to get a better understanding of factors that may push someone to reoffend. I also wanted to, in my next post, look at how inmates are portrayed within the media and then explain why these portrayals need to change, why they are damaging to individuals. I then wanted to look at the depictions of women in the media that need to be challenged because I think that they are highly controversial and they need to be challenged by the public since at the end of the day, the public decides essentially what kind of media is circulated. I also wanted to look at raising awareness for the adversities that incarcerated women have endured that the media does not illustrate. So I listed those. I wanted to, in my next post, give some information about what visual criminology is, just to give the public some idea about the findings that we have within criminology, within the institutional school setting that the public does not have readily accessible access to. And then the last slide, I made it for challenging media narratives about incarceration and rehabilitation. So I listed those there about how potentially my followers, I know that no one's following my account, but if they were, how they could be advocates and promote activism within this realm of increasing and bettering how individuals are seen when they are released from an institution, and how they could give these findings and educate those around them. So on this last slide, these are the references that I used in my presentation. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the content I covered today, since I really did enjoy researching it all and creating this media strategy. Thanks. Bye.